started. Does that sound like a good idea? We're ready? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And we'll pass it on to Sakina in just a second. So today's topic is hybrid flexible. If we could go back to the first slide, thank you, so I can read it off. So we're going to be talking about a model for active and engaged learning. And one key thing that I'd like to highlight is just pay attention to the title here. It's HyFlex, so hybrid flexible. And we're going to be diving into definitions in just a minute. So if we can go to the next slide. So in the Office of Online Education here at Lehman College, we serve to create, promote, and support effective and accessible and flexible learning at Lehman College. You might have heard that we have been doing quite well actually prior to the pandemic in terms of our online offerings at Lehman. Most of our Lehman students take at least one online class during an academic year once they start at Lehman College. So we are really excited to continue promoting the flexible learning opportunities through the HyFlex model as well. So today you have Sakina Laksimi, who is our lead on this project, and she will be taking us through the presentation. My name is Olena Zhadko. I'm the Director of Online Education, and I'm thrilled to really dive into this topic, mainly because if we go to the next slide, mainly because for us, I think it's really key to talk about flexible learning opportunities and to remember a couple of things. So HyFlex was not meant as a solution for distance education. So for us at Lehman, we are not thinking to replace asynchronous distance, really well done and well-designed courses by a HyFlex modality, right? So the idea for the HyFlex is that the students who are not able to attend in class can still fully participate online, either synchronously or asynchronously. And I just like to draw your attention to the fact of how we are focusing first on in person. If not able to attend in person, then we go to synchronous online and then to asynchronous online. And we'll highlight some of these key things later on. And one thing just for you to know that kind of the mindset that we bring to the conversation about HyFlex is that we believe that HyFlex really does provide an opportunity to innovate in teaching and learning and experiment. And HyFlex is really new to us. So I think what we have done and Sakina has done is really look deeper into some of the key elements about HyFlex and how to make it work and key considerations. So I'm going to pass it on to Sakina, and we are really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to start by including this slide of San Francisco State University. This was the first place where the hybrid flexible course model was first created. It was actually in response to local crises like fires and earthquakes, as well as it started in a master's program in instructional design where students were not able to come to class all the time. So they thought of this model as a way to be responsive to kind of ongoing crises, as well as a way to allow students greater access to a course. And the reason that I even mention that is because HyFlex has become very, like the term HyFlex has really re-emerged in public discourse, especially at the university level, because of the quarantine and thinking about how we're gonna re-enter a fall. where we're not really sure what things are going to look like and how we're going to utilize like our existing online spaces with reopening actual physical spaces. But what I wanted to really talk about was that this model has been used many, many times in different contexts, in very local contexts and in different ways. So it's not something new. A hybrid flexible course and how it's different than just a regular hybrid course is that students can choose which modality to participate in to fulfill the course learning goals. So the course is designed with more than one learning path, one that is all online work and one in which there is a fully in-person experience, and students are able to choose how they participate. In a hybrid course, there's only one learning path. So generally the instructor sets the dates where you meet in person versus where you meet virtually and when you do your online work, and all students follow this one path. HyFlex is the objective of designing a hybrid course with flexible participation options that enable students to have choice within the constraints and capacity possible for the institution, instructor, and technology. So I kind of articulated this loaded but succinct statement to kind of reframe what HyFlex is. It's not just a technological solution to how do we accommodate all students in the fall, but it's really the objective of how you design a course where students are able to have enough autonomy to choose how they participate, but to have that choice within the realistic constraints and capacity of the institution. So whether it's Lehman College or Columbia University or Queens College, also the constraints and capacity of the individual instructor and the technology that's available. And I think that's really important to know that yes, you're designing with flexibility and choice, but you have to really figure out what that choice means realistically for you. So similar multimodal course designs have popped up since 2006. So you'll see from 2008 and onwards, there's the mode neutral, multi-access learning, Pierce Fit from Pierce University was actually trademarked, and they've all used this model where students are able to choose whether they do their work online or come in person. These are kind of more current iterations of HyFlex, how HyFlex has been used during the quarantine. So you'll see Pace University has been doing a lot of work with HyFlex, as well as places around the state, and actually also in Australia and New Zealand. They've been experimenting with HyFlex models for a long time. This is my favorite slide. I think there's such relief in knowing that there is no kind of dogmatic way of approaching HyFlex. In its current conceptualization, most faculty and administrators see HyFlex as a way to engage a streaming or technologies to allow students to either come in person or connect online. This is not the only model of HyFlex. This is not something that's kind of written anywhere that you have to do. HyFlex is very much open to interpretation based on this idea of maximizing both online and in-person interactions. Sorry. HyFlex is not a prescription. So it's not prescriptive. It doesn't have to be done in a certain way. It is also not an answer to any specific pedagogical or technological hurdles. So if it's operationalized just to kind of solve a problem in the fall, that's not really the best use of HyFlex. HyFlex will not work well for all courses. There are just courses where this design objective is not aligned, as well as HyFlex will not be aligned with all faculty or students. So depending on your expectations, your values, what kind of course you teach, the discipline, all this stuff, it might not work for you. However, I've kind of, in brainstorming different ways that HyFlex can be used, I've come up with 5 different models of HyFlex. So there's the live streaming hybrid session, which is kind of the most high tech and common conception of how to use HyFlex. It can also be used for differentiated learning and flipped classroom. So these are existing pedagogies that can be further enhanced and incorporated into the HyFlex model. There's the staggered attendance and learning cohorts model. Place-based and experiential learning, again, another high impact and pedagogical practice that's been around for a long time. So how can this also be incorporated into the HyFlex model, and project-based learning. So I'm gonna actually go through all of these and give some examples. So again, like I said, the most common one is the live streamed hybrid session. So this is where faculty design a course in which students are coming to the classroom, but some are opting to come in person and some are opting to join virtually through Zoom or some other can work well for a regular lecture or a seminar type of course. The advantage of this model is that it is enables greater accessibility. So for students who are not able to access the space, not able to come for any type of reason, that they can still fully participate in the course through digital technology. Oopsies. One second, I am having some technical issues with my internet. Okay, sorry, I was just having some technical issues. So the next model is utilizing differentiated learning and flipped classroom. So differentiated learning is something that's a lot more popular in the K-12 context, but it's also well known in post-secondary education, where you are designing lesson plans that are catered to or responsive to different students' need within the same classroom. So a good example of this is like a large math 101 course where students are required to take this course, and they come in at a lot of different levels with a lot of different strengths and needs. And differentiated learning is a way to be able to kind of like be responsive to all those students, even though they're not all in the same level. Flipped classroom is another method where you can kind of do that as well. So you can utilize the hybrid flexible model to kind of most effectively utilize these pedagogical practices. So one way of doing this is a class in which students, for example, take online, watch online video lectures and take an assessment. If they do well in the assessment, they're able to perhaps go on to another virtual learning module, whether that's pre-recorded lectures or something that's a virtual lab or something like that. And for students that perhaps don't do so well in the assessments, they're then come into the classroom to do more workshopping and hands-on support with the instructor. So that's a really good way of utilizing HyFlex to be more responsive to student needs and to be able to differentiate and have the students who can work more independently do that stuff online, and the students who need to come in to do that in person. And you can see how this can work for multiple types of courses, science courses, writing courses. Another model that's actually been used a lot, it's been used at different CUNYs. I know that Bronx Community College is currently doing it with their lab program and have been doing it throughout the pandemic, in which students are divided into groups. So if you have 25 students, for example, they come in on a rotating basis, and then on the weeks that the students are not there in person, they have other work that they're doing virtually online. So it doesn't necessarily require them to connect to every session. Actually, they have other things to do online, but that students are staggered into different groups. So this works really well for courses where you need the access to the physical space. Lehman College, for example, has great printmaking space and ceramics. So those are things where you actually need the classroom, but not necessarily that the whole group has to come in together. Obviously, for lab classes, that's also really important. And then your kind of larger course becomes more learning cohorts as opposed to one large community. Experiential and place-based learning. So this is another pedagogical practice and approach that's been used at CUNY and beyond for a long time. So I put an image here. This can work well with kind of science or environmental science classes and things like that. So this is a hybrid flexible model in which you don't even have to come to campus most of the time. Designing a course this way, sorry, I'm like trying to monitor people coming in. Designing a course this way enables students to do a lot of the work autonomously, maybe even be able to connect for some virtual sessions, but to have the option of going to different locations to do their learning. This can be done like as a group, as a large group, or it can be done individually. New York City has a wealth of different places that I know instructors are already using to drive their learning. Museums, galleries, even public art. So I know that there's been some instructors, especially in language classes and anthropology classes, that use place-based learning, where they have students go out in their local communities to take pictures. So this is another way where you can use meaningful physical interaction and then online work to have a hybrid flexible course design. The final model is project-based learning. This is also, largely in which a course is designed in a way where students have scaffolded activities that lead up to one large project. And the way that students can come in is for presentations, workshops, again, where students are doing a lot of the research and analysis and writing and content creation alone in virtual spaces, but coming in person for their presentations or to get a little bit more support or to get demonstrations. So kind of these 5 models are ways to think about hybrid flexible course design, from like the high tech of the live hybrid streaming session all the way to kind of place-based, where you're not even utilizing campus space or those technologies. And I think that there's a lot of different ways or models that we can come up with. Some of the strengths, all of them have strengths and weaknesses, right? So, for example, for the live streaming session, it does have greater accessibility and things like that, but you really have to think about how you facilitate a session like that. And it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but perhaps how you assign students to be chat facilitators, how you build assignments so that students are able to communicate with each other across modalities, so that it's not one group that's in person that's completely dislocated from a group that is connected somewhere else. For example, place-based learning, the constraint could be it might not work for large classes. You also have to know accessibility for different buildings and places that you're asking students to go to. So all of these models have their constraints and their strengths. It really is about how each individual instructor will design the course. HyFlex courses can also work really well for larger courses where staggered attendance is helpful, and where instructors are already using a lot of digital tools and having students participate in multiple ways. So key considerations for HyFlex planning, I think it's really important to acknowledge the issue of labor. In my conversations with faculty especially, There's a lot of concern about having to invest a ton of time and feeling like you're facilitating two different courses. I think a well-designed HyFlex course, it takes a long time to design that course, but once it's designed, the facilitation should not be too difficult. It should be a more pleasant and fluid teaching experience. But of course, there's always the kind of designing a new course and the learning curve that is going to require some labor. So that's a consideration. The other consideration is how many students you have, what is the room capacity. This is really going to determine what kind of model you can use or if HyFlex is even realistic for you. Access to technology and the room setup. So Olena will talk a little bit more about how Lehman is transforming some of the rooms for HyFlex. Learning goals and outcomes. So you really want to consider whether your existing learning goals and outcomes are aligned with this type of course design. It may or may not work. It may require you to be more flexible with learning goals or which ones students are able to choose from. And finally, faculty values, expectations, and preferences. So like what a faculty is comfortable doing, what they expect of students, how they conceive of what learning is and what a classroom is also going to be a key determiner of whether HyFlex is going to work or not. And then just on a note, we are already pretty invested in open education resources. And I think that this is an excellent space to kind of expand on that and leverage that use. OERs are a wonderful way of expanding digital spaces and how our classrooms are currently run and can be like really easily incorporated into the HyFlex model. Olena, you want to?
Thank you so much, Sakina. I know we're trying to cover a lot of ground here.
Yeah, I know.
Something to keep in mind as we think about it. So this is a result of some of our work and preliminary conversations that we've had with our faculty in terms of helping them think through how to redesign, rethink, and reinvent learning, implementing many of these pedagogical, multimodal approaches. And of course, as you know, Sakina noted about open educational resources. So in real life, what ends up happening is, in addition to reducing cost for our students, we're really focusing on rethinking and recreating new ways of teaching and learning. So on the next slide, I'd like to take us through the physical space. And I know Sakina talked about the pedagogical implications, and we actually have Ron Bergman in the room, our VP of IT, and I'm really thankful for all of the innovative implementation and really drive to support Lehman in providing opportunities in the physical spaces. So what you see on this slide here is essentially the plan that our IT has for preparing the classrooms. And as you know, some of the classrooms sometimes don't have even the basic technology. So the idea is that to provide the space and easy, really easy startup space where a faculty member can essentially come in, turn on the button, and able to focus on teaching rather than on the technical support. And I know as we talk about HyFlex, there's quite a national and international conversation about the two different supports that need to be put into place, right? And one is the technical support, and what we have seen so far is typically that's needed at least, it is required, to have those additional support during at least the first 3 sessions of class when faculty and students are getting used to the idea of being in this more kind of technology enhanced classroom. But also a major impact, or there's quite a lot of conversation about the need for academic support, right? So having either it's a teaching assistant or it's somebody who is able to follow the back channel conversation, make sure that all students have their questions answered, that they can fully participate and engage. So I'm going to leave this slide for you just to quickly look at. And if you have any specific questions, I'm sure Ron will be able to answer those questions. But I think the main point here is we need to make sure that we marry the technology that's in place with the course redesign, which is key when it comes to faculty thinking about HyFlex and how to approach it. It's a completely new modality. And as many of you, some of you have tried already to facilitate, maybe sometimes we have a few people coming and joining online and the majority of the classes in person. So some of these challenges that come with facilitating that conversation and how faculty would have to be very creative in terms of thinking of the ways to engage. So again, I think would like to emphasize one key point here is that course design is going to be really key in order for HyFlex to be successful. And Sakina covered a lot of ground here in terms of helping us think through, what do we need to consider as we transition or as we experiment with HyFlex. I'm going to pause here and go to the next slide and see if any of you have any questions. Would be happy to hear from you and engage with you in discussing how we could experiment with HyFlex.
I'm going to stop sharing the screen, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Can I talk about the summer thing, the summer inquiry group?
Maybe that's for a different time.
Okay. Well, anyone has questions?
Let's see if any of you have any questions, if you're thinking about challenges or opportunities that HyFlex can offer us.
How do you get this program in your classroom if you're interested?
This question is from Teresa, right?
Yes.
So, and Teresa, what school are you with?
Hostas.
Hostas. So I'd probably, so right now, I think this is all sort of experimental. So I'd probably talk to Carlos Guevara, at your campus and see what supports are being put into place. So I think we're all experimenting in this place. What Sakina wanted to talk about just a second ago, and I paused her on that, is right now, I'll just mention one thing that we're going to do at Lehman. At Lehman, we're hosting a webinar for all our Lehman faculty, which is going to be a little bit of a deeper dive into HyFlex. So it's going to be essentially this presentation that you have heard, but a little bit more hands-on in terms of helping faculty think about it. So right now, I think most of the campuses at CUNY are thinking about ways to support this. So I talked to your Center for Teaching and Learning, your Office of Online, and see what their plans are in terms of supporting this. Jennifer, you had a hand up.
Hey, Olena. Thanks you both for this really interesting presentation. I wondered if you could talk a little more about the technology piece, the carts. I mean, at Lehman, will those be in the rooms when the faculty and students come in, or do you have, I'm curious about what kind of tech support. Do you have student helpers or college assistants, or who really provides that support or in your planning if it's not happening right now?
I'm going to pass it on. That's a great question. And Ron, can you please speak on that?
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thank you both for a wonderful presentation. Jennifer, to answer your question, we have several classrooms on the campus that do not have fully equipped technology. So the carts will be inclusive. They all have presentation technology, so that is covered. But the carts will be inclusive of small form factor PC. The Logitech meetup will be on a monitor that will also be on the cart, and the other equipment that's necessary to plug in to the presentation equipment in the classroom will be enabled. So the reason to have two, a projector and the monitor is to be able to project, say, the PowerPoint presentation, or, for example, a website, but also to see the remote students. It also is possible for somebody to remote in, a guest or even the faculty member. So we want to make it, as Olena said, as flexible as possible. And so the option here is to get something that we can start up easily and make it as easy as possible for the faculty member. But in the fall semester, we will have students that we will hire who will be coming from the schools and the departments involved to support their faculty members, and they will be responsible. They'll be trained and responsible for pushing the buttons and getting things ready. And we don't expect that we're going to have to move the carts too much on a floor, but they will be the people who will do what Olena said about monitoring a chat, for example. They'll be the technical support for the faculty member. So we remove the friction of the quick startup, and we make sure that the faculty can focus on the pedagogy and not the technology, with the idea that over time, they will become more comfortable. And over time also, we're going to have those two model classrooms that are more the end state of what we're trying to do, which will have beamforming mics and wall-mounted cameras, so that that technology will be really where we head towards, and we'll get feedback and input from faculty on those two rooms during the fall semester as we build out the program more widely across the Lehman campus, because this opportunity doesn't come along very often, maybe once every generation or something like that. And so we have older equipment, older technology that will be updated as a result of this. And we think that it will be affirming for the faculty and students to have that more contemporary approach, but also it enables us to improve our scope and to expand our scale so that we can do more to support, in our case, primarily the Bronx community and the region, as we upskill and create opportunities for people, because we've been hit in the Bronx with higher rates of unemployment, as you know. And so we want to make sure that we're prepared for the future, and that this can be something that shifts with the needs of the faculty to do whatever mode of teaching that is required. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ron. And I just want to note that we are at time.
I saw that Mark had a question, but
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
one
someone
quick
else had a
question.
question.
There we go. Mark Leonardton.
Let my question go. I was just going to say it's a great presentation. We're doing something very similar in the Bronx. Really, my only question was, do you find anything different in a laboratory setting than in a traditional classroom setting? But I know time is short. Thanks.
I will just quickly answer that we would have to consider the lab setting. You saw one of the pictures that Sakina has presented where it's going to be a bit different, mainly because if we're talking about COVID time, there's still certain limitations to the guidelines. So we'd have to consider that and maybe utilize that staggered model and maybe smaller classrooms and things like that. Think about virtual labs and how maybe we could implement and apply some of the asynchronous tools as well to enhance the student learning experience. But Mark, I would love to chat with you more, because we're having these conversations on our campus with a few of those who really expressed interest in experimenting with this model. I think it's a very interesting model. It's very innovative. It's new. Sometimes it could be rather scary. So I'm excited that we're going through this process of trying to find answers to the questions that haven't been, asked or answered. And just for everybody, I want to note that in the chat, I pasted a link to the presentation slide deck. We do invite you to follow up with us. So Sakina's email and my email is on the second slide in the presentation. We'd be happy to hear from you what you're doing on your campus and try to put our heads together and see how we could find answers to this unanswered questions. So thank you again for being here, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation offline as well.